traditional authority here represents the as a form of approval, acknowledgement that there is something African chiefs in the traditional to say sorry for whatever rules the African chiefs. I beg that we take notice of the messaging here, we make references to that before we experience. We'll start down in the middle slave that it is a gentle slope at this sleep. So please take your time to let us trace that. Designed to hold between 700 to 1,000 men. So they would share between 150 to 200 men in each space. What we are going to be seeing on the walls, the holes on the walls, will serve as a source of light and ventilation. Up to 200 men in each space. So we have the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. We are starting today's presentation here in the text. Right on top of this very space, the church, Society for the Propagation of the Gospel, the Church of England, present day Anglican Church. So the Anglican Church of Ghana would begin right on top of the male slave line, the gates. The Catholic Church of Ghana would begin at Romania, Presbyterian Church, Christian, Methodist, and the fourth church here. Christianity in Ghana will begin right in the same concepts. Here we see a spiral, and this sits right in front of the church. It is to tell you that before they entered to pray, to listen to love your neighbor as yourself. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. They saw some of the neighbors here. They had them quiet. They received their stitch before they entered to pray. Some of the neighbors were killed in the castle. The women were sexually abused. And what would interest you to know is that for 50 years an African was ministering to an all-European congregation out there as fellow Africans like yourself died right and hated. So once upon a time an African was preaching to the Europeans as his own brothers died and hated. I know if anyone has a question, definitely around an African. As soon as we move outside, the first presentation is centered on him. So if you have any questions about the preacher, I beg that we wait as we move outside. I'm going to talk about that. So let's move back to the first chamber. I would love that we experience how it was down here. Yes, this is how it felt down here. Imagine staying in this for up to 4 months. What you see up there, 7, as the only source of life and ventilation. This explains why some historians believe some left partially or permanently. I mentioned that they kept between 150 to 200 men in each space. This was the chamber that was locked. This was the room for the aggressive men. Those that were too stubborn were locked up in here. Down here, they did everything. They were fed here, they slept here, urinated, defecated, everything done down here. Rains were expected to pass through this whole pit to wash away the feces and the urine through the trenches you see in the middle of the edges, right down into the sea. The question is, how many times will it rain in a week? In a month, how many times does it rain? Because they lived in the fields, the mess in here, most of them fell sick, most of them died. Once an enslaved African was found dead in these dungeons, the bodies were carried and down straight into the sea. And as to tell you, no enslaved African was given a fitting burial here in the castle. Once found dead, they were thrown straight into the sea. When you get to read literatures about transatlantic slave trafficking, It is estimated that a little over 4.5 million West Africans survived the trade. But getting over times 3, the numbers they put out pertaining to survival were the casualties. So if indeed 12.5 million survived, then over 30 million didn't. Yet the trade at a point in time became so lucrative, these Europeans began to fight each other, kill each other to take charge of our lands. As this story progresses, we get to know the land this very space sits on would exchange hands between 5 different countries. In 1974, where we stand today was excavated by a group of archaeologists from the University of Ghana. It is only then we get to know the initial floors were made of bricks. If you came here before that, that's where you have next. And that catchment is here. And this is exactly what we have been working on. So from the second to the fifth chamber, you see something like this. Test conducted, what we see here, what we have been working on is solidified or compacted human waste. These are tears, blood, sweat, urine, feces, vomit, spat, among other things left in it. They will leave these ends intentionally untouched. If ever we get doubters in our groups, they are permitted to get samples. We'll test them themselves to see if there are traces of human DNA in them. Up until now, people still come here and doubt and slavery ever existed in the first place. So if you belong to that school of thought, we allow you to get samples. We'll have them tested yourselves to see if you get traces of human DNA. The first thing we'll do is look at you. Do we have any questions? We are to see the fifth chamber, but because of the book, okay, there is the And this chamber, we have no light, no bulb, but the place is still bright. But they left this end so for the sorting out of the slaves. I mentioned earlier they were branded with hot metal, so this is where they would sort them out for shipment. This end to that end was an entrance to a tunnel. It connected to the door of no return. That is where the women would join them for shipment. This would be sealed 1834 and was supervised by Captain George McLean to mark the end of slave trafficking in this very edifice. But in 1807, a law was passed to abolish slavery. Those in here were still trafficking. So to mark the end in here, they would have to seal the entrance and the exit to signify the end of slave trafficking in this space. You see some remains to my right. They are brought in by tourists like yourselves to pay respect to those that died here. Though their bodies were thrown into the sea, we believe their souls remain here in the castle. That's why we leave them here. And to my left, we see a room. If during the shipment you are 2 weeks sick, they doubt you survived the voyage. You were unshackled and kept here. If you died, you're down into the sea. If you survive, you wait for the next available shipment. Your survival in there was dependent on your immune system. This end once was an entrance to a tunnel. This was not part of the initial setup of the castle. Where we stand today is a shrine. We stand before the altar of the leader of the 77 deities here in Cape Coast. The people here on this land believe in 77 gods, and this is the leader of the gods of Cape Coast. The name of the god is Nana Tabre. The Africans, we had our own worship before the Europeans came. We communicated to our creator using nature. Africans worship through trees, stones, rivers, mountains, among other mediums to communicate with our creator. And then this edifice sits on a huge stone. You saw the model of the castle in the museum. This entire edifice was built on rock. And that rock was the medium through which the natives worshipped before the Europeans came. And that's our bread, the leader of the 77 gods of Cape Coast. When the chiefs gave this land to the Europeans, those that worshipped through that rock would carve too. They performed certain rituals. They had a belief they were relocating their reward from here. They took the stones back into the township to continue their worship. As the trade ended, the castle was given back to the natives. Those that would worship through that stone would see it wise to return their reward to its initial spot. So till date, where we stand is an active and one of the most important shrines we have here in Cape Coast. The man seated here is in charge of the shrine. Monday to Sunday is here to lead those that still believe and practice this worship through their prayers. Sometimes you come, the altar is full of gifts, drinks, clothes, money, among other stuff. Those that still believe and practice this. When you come here to pray, they have a belief, whatever prayers and petitions they came to say to their God is answered, or will be answered. They drop those things as an offering to God. In Cape Coast, we have a rich cultural, colorful, traditional festival. It is called Fetu Wafashe. We celebrate it every first Saturday of September. Before we commence, the natives come here to slaughter a ram. They kill a sheep in here, offer the blood as a sacrifice to the god before we commence with Fitwa fashion. So when we stand, it's an active and one of the most important shrines we have here in Cape. The fifth chamber. Do we have any questions? So, first you realize I had to take off my footwear before the prayers were said. Ordinarily, we do not enter shrines with footwear. But then, because this end is a tourist site, you can't tell every visiting tourist to take care of their footwear. So it is allowed here. But then those that know, before they invoke the gods of the land, have to stand barefoot. That is why I have to take off my footwear. First, you realize he pointed the calabash up to the skies. I mentioned that Africans, we knew God before the Europeans came. So it is to acknowledge the presence of a supreme being. What he used to pray is on palm wine. So he first acknowledged God and invoked the 77 gods of this land, especially the leader, because it is his shrine we stand in, thanking him for yet another wonderful year. He referred to you as his grandchildren, because he always believed that, yes, our ancestors passed through this, and though they could not return, we are fortunate to be here. So we thank the God for your safe arrival. Pray for all your endeavors that whatever you do, he will bless the work of your hands. Everything you do should be prosperous. Pray for the kids as well, that those of us that are schooling, whatever we learn, we should be granted retentive memory. We came with vehicles. As we return to our various destinations, he should guide us safe passage back to wherever we came from. And in all things, he gave thanks to the Lord as well. So this version, what he said, and he spoke Fanti, was that this is a Fanti land. This is the prayer he said on our behalf. Those that have tokens for him, you can see a word of prayer and you drop it for him. Only African found buried among the Europeans here. His name is Philip. Philip was a native of this land by the name Echi. His father was called Obrimpon Kuju. He was a local slave merchant. Philip's father was one of the Africans who traded fellow Africans to the Europe. And through the connections his father had with them, he got a chance to Great Britain. Philip would read theology in Oxford. In 24, he became the first African to be ordained an Anglican priest. In 25, he would return to Gold Coast to serve as a reverend minister. And this guy, for 50 years, he was ministering to an all-European congregation up here, right underneath his fellow Africans. 1816, age 75, like that. History says before he died, treatment for him in the castle changed. Allowances he received was not coming as regular as he used to be. He had to move out of the castle for commerce. He had to fend for himself. Through that, he introduced the natives as to how to read, write, and speak the English language. So Western education here in Ghana is attributed to him. 5 minutes drive from this castle is the first school in Gold Coast and Anna of them. It's called Philip Kwaku Boys School. It's 5 minutes from here. Some historians believe he was brainwashed. This explains why an African would preach to an all-European congregation. Africans died right underneath him. He was taken from Gold Coast when he was just 11. Spent 14 years there. So they believe he was reprogrammed. Some scholars believe 14 years is too short a time for one to totally and completely forget his roots. And I side with them. But they need 14 years is too short. I met a group of tourists. They would tell me that people travel to Europe today. Some Africans, barely 2 years, they come back, they're even more European than Europeans themselves. So 14 years to them is enough for an 11-year-old boy to undergo brainwashing. But I think Philip was conscious. One man against an entire system in here, we knew very little about the happenings here in the castle. Right. Here we have 3 Europeans. I don't know if you want me to touch on them, because mostly I have to seek permission from my group. We have to talk about the Europeans. We can just mention the names. Yeah. The first one is a soldier, C.B. Whitehead. 1812 was shot in one of the Anglo-Dutch wars. The middle, Letitia Elizabeth London, wife of once the administrator here in the castle, George McLean. She came to visit her husband. Just 2 months, she was found dead in the castle. Some said it's suicide. Others said there was an African mistress that killed her. Third says it's malaria. 3 things said one that best to and then the other one, George McLean, once the administrator in charge of the castle, he supervised the closure of the tunnel to mark the end of slave trafficking in the castle. There's a very popular document here in Ghana called the Bond of 1844, ushered Ghana into 113 years colonial rule. He drafted that bond to be signed between Commander Hill and the native chiefs. Age 46 confirmed malaria. Let's see the reservoir that is. 18 feet, 8 foot wide, a reservoir connected to the roofs to harvest rain. This is what they used to cook for the slaves, give them to drink, and as well clean the women before they were sexually abused. Remember, the castle were raped. Before that, they had to clean them first. It still serves as a reservoir, connected to the national grid now. So it is pipe-borne water we pump in here. This is what we use for our washrooms as we short water in the castle. For the men. Please watch your head as you move in. I don't want anyone to carry the castle. Please watch your head. Please watch your head.
On I'm going. Hurry up.
Alright, so pitch pine we quoted before. If you know your woods very well, you know pitch pine is one of the strongest woods in the world. There are 3 of such woods. The first, the second, third. A little over a minute in here, you can feel the heat here. Imagine those left in here with all 3 doors shut. They were to die of starvation and suffocation. Those brought in here were considered rebellious. If you were too aggressive, you were locked up in the first chamber of the male slave line. If yours exceeded aggression, you tried to escape. You fought the officers. You saw yourself a freedom fighter, you gave them a hard time in the castle. First, you were given a good beating at the courtyard. Then you were dragged in here, left to die. And the most painful bit is if at any point in time you brought a number of people in here, until the last man amongst them dies, nobody left this room. It is to say, if you were strong and resilient to stay alive for days, you'd have to endure the stench of rotten and decaying corpse to die yourself. And then dragged outside, displayed at the courtyard for those 2 storm, brought back to see what happens to those who don't contain. So this was designed to serve as a deterrent to the living and as well to bring them mentally. Initially, a story being converted to serve that purpose. I'm feeling one guy in here today with high control, but please watch your heads. Please watch your heads. Up to experience where the governor lived, so we can compare for ourselves where the African was kept and where some of the Europeans. Let's see